generations, the truth has been hidden, and the narrative has been controlled. The truth that we are not alone, and we never have been. When you listen to the experiencers, to the insiders, a pattern begins to emerge of the extraterrestrial reality, of our contact and cooperation with them, of advanced technologies obtained from them, and that have been utilized for many decades, of programs and information so deeply compartmentalized that only a small handful of people know the full picture. If even a fraction of these accounts are true, then the implications are staggering. People are starting to wake up to these truths and to the greater reality surrounding us. Disclosure has been happening for a long time, and it's still happening now. In this episode, we go deeper into the testimonies, the cover-ups, and the hidden structures that are shaping our reality from behind the scenes. The question is no longer if something is happening, but how much has been kept from us.
The United States government, along with other governments of the world, has been totally denying the existence of unidentified flying objects that were not of earthly origin, knowing that we do have visitors, knowing full well that these objects are here, that they are of extraterrestrial origin.
The ultimate outcome of the debriefing was that we didn't see anything, we didn't hear anything, and we had to read rules and regulations that told us that if we ever talked about what it was that we didn't see, that we could be imprisoned, we could be fined $10,000, we could lose all pay and allowances due or ever to become due. And I learned at that moment that the United States Navy didn't want anybody to know about what we saw, and that severe consequences could come down around the neck of anybody who did. And that was when I understood fully that, yeah, there's a real cover-up. These things do exist, number one, and at least the United States Navy doesn't want anybody to know about it.
Your government and mine has known for at least 40 years what these objects are. The cover-up and the lie has come from your government as well as mine. They're both guilty, because as I say to the American people, the American taxpayers who pay the bills, you not only have a right to know the truth on this matter, you have a need to know. And I'm damn sick and tired of bureaucrats lying to the people, whether it's in London, Leeds, or the United States. The lying has got to stop. It's time to tell the truth.
But then there's been a shift in the last 20 years. The American public now really believes there's somebody else out there. And if somebody would land here right now, the American public would go, cool. What they will be a problem is that if the federal government's caught lying, which I know they are lying, they've been lying for probably since 1971 that I know for sure. So if they've been lying, then Roswell is very likely it's true. So they've been lying 50 consecutive years and probably much longer than that. The engine I saw did not come from the Roswell crash. The engine I saw was as big as the Roswell craft. So this is something even bigger. That's another one. So how many do they have? How much they got? If it comes out, it's not so much as the public's going to panic that there's alien life out there. No, it's going to be anarchy because people are going to be so ticked off with D.C. for lying so many years. That is what the government fears. They do not fear you being violent hostile about aliens landing and we're going to go crazy. No, they're going to freak out because they're going to be caught in about a 5-decade lie.
The country needs to know about it. The planet needs to know about what has taken place. And we've been lied to. I say this over and over. We've all been lied to for a minimum of 6,000 years.
It literally concluded that we on planet Earth, the human race, had an intimate interrelationship with advanced non-human intelligence for centuries, if not millennia. The historical annex was quite thorough. There were reports that the Romans and the Greeks had written of seeing these shields in the sky, these circular discs, these metallic objects, in formation all over the place. And the conclusions reached after the study was published was that apparently these guys have been coming and going here for from the beginning of our history. And that no, there was not apparently a threat involved, because if there had been, the repeated demonstrations of their incredibly advanced technology indicated that if they were malevolent or hostile, the game would have been over a long, long time ago. As one of the Air Force generals said, hell, they could have cleaned our clock at any time. Well, they didn't clean our clock, and they haven't cleaned our clock since.
Allegedly, this interaction has occurred since, man was a simian creature. And, there were genetic alterations made.
How specifically did the briefings detail how the aliens manipulated our genetics over the centuries?
It mentioned 65 or 63 corrections or additions to the genetic makeup that finally resulted in a human creature. Obviously, the ET craft do exist. Something had to build them, so there must be aliens. And since there are, and the craft are there must be some sort of factory and an entire civilization somewhere. And if in fact that is true, and it apparently is, then there must be others. Actual crafts and technology from another world. And that's probably the most important event in history.
In my opinion, the U.S. government has recovered at least 40 discs belonging to alien civilization from far beyond the solar system. There's at least 80 different alien civilizations visiting us. Many of these discs were undamaged, and the U.S. Navy has successfully flown several of them under a secret program begun in the middle 50s.
Some of them are alien metals that have been produced both on this planet and the confines of outer space that are now used in all stealth aircraft. All this has come from alien technology. The military has known about the alien question for the better part of 70 years. All information dealing with alien or alien reproduced technology or alien reproduced vehicles or any other kinds of things well hidden from the American public. Our black budget, for instance, garners $1.023 trillion every 2 years. It's over $500 billion a year. Right now, there are 131 active deep underground military bases in the United States. There's 1,477 of them worldwide. Each one has an average cost of $17 to $19 billion. The public basically has been totally lied to. We're considered stupid or even moronic in some cases. It's got to stop. But if the truth cannot totally come out, what's the use in us having anything called freedom?
So how did you go about trying to find the stuff that you were looking for in NASA, in the Department of Defense?
Well, I assumed that although it's part of a secret government project, there must be military ties. I'd read 400 expert witness testimonies, ranging from civilian air traffic controllers through military radar operators, all the way up to guys that were in charge of whether or not to launch nuclear missiles. So some very credible people. All of these people had said that there are UFOs, they are alien. We're using anti-gravity and reverse engineered technology that came from captured UFO craft.
We're using anti-gravity?
Yeah.
Right now? Who's using anti-gravity?
Secret compartmented parts of the government.
The level of secrecy and secret facilities and the capabilities of our nationally kept secrets would shatter most people's imagination of what is possible. Area 51, Los Alamos, Dulce, 100 other top secret bases where information is kept or hidden from the public in general, it would be very hard to accept that all of this information that is currently held secret and classified is actually real. What could be so important at Area 51 that would require the level of secrecy that is in existence around that facility? Well, certainly if I said that we kept the U.S. space fleet there and that space fleet was what we would understand to be UFOs. The U.S. has dozens, if not hundreds, of vehicles that are more than capable of space flight, and make it so we would have a fleet of vehicles that would be seemingly extraterrestrial. And the reason that has to be kept that way is because if you know that those vehicles exist, you start to question the technology that they're based on. And when you start to do that, then you start to question why we're still using petroleum products and solid rocket boosters and everything else, and things get quickly out of hand after that.
I had met with Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14, and basically Edgar Mitchell made a very powerful statement as to the fact that Roswell was real, that he had called the Pentagon, that his Pentagon source had said Roswell was real, that this subject matter is highly classified, that he can't even get to the truth of it, that most presidents can't get to the truth of it. If I don't believe Edgar Mitchell, who's an astronaut, if I don't believe Colonel Philip Corso, who worked in the Pentagon and back engineering alien technology, then who do we believe?
What I'm investigating are cases where the craft lands, the occupants get out, they interact with the witnesses, they produce phenomena, they are wearing different garments and different clothes, their skin color is different, they get back in the ship and fly away. Those are not piezoelectric phenomena or mental aberrations or anything else. That really happened. And if it happens over and over again, you have more and more witnesses verifying the ones before until you have a body of evidence that is indisputable. Yet, somebody will come along and say, oh, it's all something that they dreamed and they think it's reality. And when that's not the case at all. We have absolute solid reality going on here. It becomes a national security problem of great importance when it involves, when this phenomenon involves unique technology, unique to our society and time. And everybody is experiencing the same kind of phenomena. They're not just visiting one country or one place. It's happening all over the world. And every place where it happens, they retain the best evidence for their own information, but always thinking that they've got a piece of the puzzle and they don't want to give that piece to somebody else that might complete his puzzle before theirs. Well, everybody holds all the pieces to their chest, doesn't release any information, hopes to get information that others have without giving anything in return. And in that sense, it becomes a national security problem because it always represents the potential for a technological breakthrough that would give us an advantage or give an enemy an advantage over all the rest of the world. And so in that sense, it's a serious national security problem. And I understand that now. I understand why they're doing it.
What the hell is that?
It takes a lot less testimony to bring a case in court than it has taken for this UFO phenomenon. You can actually prosecute people on a lot less testimony than we have.
They have such an enormous amount of evidence that aliens are visiting here, even if they're not landing on the White House lawn. Why should they? The president doesn't speak for 6.7 or so billion Earthlings. It's a crazy, convoluted notions. And I get other people saying, well, if they were coming here, they would have sent a signal first. Sure, like Columbus sent smoke signals to the natives before he went west. That's absurd. We have data. They have none, except wishful thinking.
Henry Kissinger, Nelson Rockefeller, David Rockefeller, and all of these interests set up a virtual disinformation system which discredited all contactees, all public contact with benevolent extraterrestrial civilizations, which ridiculed all of the citizenry, and then which in essence privatized the contact with extraterrestrial civilizations and started an undeclared war against them in order to capture the technology.
This secret is self-keeping, and that no nation on the face of the earth could do it if people would open their eyes and would go ahead and open their minds and accept the fact that people are seeing something in the skies that appear to be under intelligent control, exhibiting a technology that we are totally incapable of. Actually, the technology would more be on the realm of magic to most of us. But it is a technology. I can't stress that enough. While you and I might say we are ready to accept that the government coming out and saying that we have visitors from other planets, NASA went ahead and stated we can't really be sure how the population of the world is going to react when we state that we have discovered extraterrestrial intelligence out there in the cosmos, let alone that that intelligence is already among us. I believe there are 57 or more different species of extraterrestrial life visiting our planet at this time. I base this on a book that I saw while I was in the military. The necessity of that book was to give us some knowledge of first aid that we could render to whatever species we might come in contact to as a result of a crash. There were times that when we'd go to crash sites, we would have some that were injured. And a lot of times, what they called an interfacer, which is what I was a part of, they would have to communicate to the other people there as to what the injuries was and what type of steps they would have to take, because they didn't verbalize what they were feeling. It was like mental telepathy. It was like you were picking it up in your mind, but you could hear them like if you and I were talking. You would have a tendency to move your lips, but you didn't have to, because they could pick up on what you were thinking at that time. It was a thought transfer process. These entities had the ability to go ahead, go through solid objects. They could appear, disappear, things that would appear to be magic to us. But it's not magic. It's technology that's not hundreds of years, but thousands of years ahead of where we're at.
There's about 38 levels above top secret. Something that is above top secret, say the 38 levels, is just to be classified as cosmic secret. It is the top, all of those clearances.
And is that the security clearance you held?
Yes.
So can you state what level of security clearance you have?
The highest is cosmic. That's UFOs, aliens, and particleization. There's only probably about 25 people in the world that know things that are known at that level. No president has had that level, has ever been cleared for that level. Eisenhower was the closest. And in the Air Force, I'd already discovered that there was UFOs and aliens.
In an official capacity?
Yes, in an official capacity. I believe God wants us known. And I believe the cosmos wants us known. And I believe that if we don't break the secrecy, we're doing our people a great harm, keeping it so secret. And if we don't break it, I believe somebody else will. Somebody outside of this planet. I believe some of the people that have been with us the last 50 years will break the secret. And they have now to certain people.
I'm David Wilcock, and I've been working for over 20 years on disclosure. My goal is to bring out the fullness of the truth of the knowledge that has been suppressed from us. I have spoken to dozens of insiders who have worked in highly classified so-called government programs run through the military-industrial complex who have had first-hand contact with extraterrestrials. And I looked them in the eye just like I'm looking you in the eye right now, and you can tell when someone is lying. These people are telling the truth. The scope of the cover-up is so vast that what we think we know about UFOs and this whole subject constitutes but a very small portion of the actual activity that is taking place in and around our Earth and our solar system right now. I started to have very strange dreams about UFOs all the way back when I was 2 years old. And not only was I having dreams of large cigar-shaped craft in my backyard, hovering maybe 20, 30 feet over the yard, I also was meeting with beings in my dreams who seemed to have a very peculiar fatherly quality. After I saw Star Wars 1977, the main being I was talking to actually became Obi-Wan Kenobi. And what's interesting about that is that Obi-Wan Kenobi says, if you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you can imagine. And it's after that that he turns into a light being. So I think that message was telling me that these light beings are real. That's why I was seeing this being in that form. I then found a book called Strange Stories, Amazing Facts. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 5, and I was very fascinated by pictures in the back of flying saucers. And the first edition of that book came out in 1978. And so I couldn't even read back then, but I was very intrigued by what I was looking at. And I really did have a huge passion for all these paranormal subjects my whole life. Where my awakening really took off was once I had gotten into college and I was in my sophomore year, that a close friend of mine showed up one day, and he was white as a piece of paper. He literally was in a traumatized state of consciousness, and he proceeded to tell me that his college physics professor was the head of the department, and that this man had worked for NASA through the 1970s at the higher echelons, and that everybody in the higher echelons of NASA was well aware that extraterrestrials were real, that they had come here, they had landed on Earth, that we had recovered technology from their ships, and that much of our modern advancements were a direct result of this cosmic inheritance.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Hare, and I worked at Philco Ford Aerospace from 1967 to 1981. During that time, I was a design illustrator, draftsman. I did the launch slides and landing slides, and also projection plotting boards, lunar maps for NASA. We were a contractor, but most of the time I worked on site, in Building 8. I had the opportunity to do extra work during downtime, which was between missions, and I walked into a photo lab, which was the NASA lab across the hallway. I had a secret clearance, which is not that high, but I was able to go into restricted areas, which this was. At the time, I was talking to one of the techs in there, and he drew my attention to a photograph, a NASA photograph. It had a dot on it, and I said, "What is that?" Well, he drew my attention to it, and I said, "Is that a dot on the emulsion?" And he said, and he's smiling, and he has his hands crossed, and he said, "Round dots on the emulsion don't leave round shadows on the ground." And this was an aerial photograph of the Earth, I'm assuming the Earth, because it had pine trees on it, and the shadows of the craft, or whatever it was, were in the same angle as the trees. And by its very nature, UFO, and I wanted to clarify that to a gentleman that was talking to me, means unidentified. So I did not know what this was. But I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, "What are you going to do with this piece of information?" And he said, "We always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public." So they're pesky little creatures appearing on this photograph they wanted to get rid of. After that, I decided I would ask questions to other people that work there. And I found that I had to ask them away from the site and not on site. A guard told me that he was asked to burn some photographs and not to look at them. And there was another guard guarding him, who was in green fatigues, watching him burn the photographs. And he said he was too tempted. He looked at one, and it was a picture of a UFO. And he was very descriptive. I can go into that later with anyone. He immediately was hit in the head, and he had a big gash in his forehead. He was knocked out, and he's terrified, so he would have to be protected. Another incident, I knew someone in quarantine with the Apollo astronauts. He told me that the Apollo astronauts saw craft on the moon when we landed, and that is what he told me. And he also was afraid. He said that the astronauts are told to keep this quiet. They're not allowed to talk about it. So I do want to let you know that I worked out there for a number of years, and I ran into this. So it's not something everyone knows that works out there for a long time. My boss didn't know about it. Some people that sat right next to me didn't know about it. It's very strange, because I don't know how they can do it, but they can let some people know about it and then others not. I'm willing to testify before Congress that what I'm saying is true, And thank you very much.
We're looking at Cydonia Mensa, which is a site where there's the face, and then there's nearby, like 5 miles away, there's a 5-sided pyramid. NASA never shows that picture of the face beside the pyramid together in any of their public photos because it becomes obvious.
Really? Because
We're
they're
looking
so
at
close.
Archaeology, you know.
And Cydonia is what region of
Cydonia is in the northern part of Mars. It was considered the garden spot of Mars. They wanted to land one of the Viking landers there. But then, in something that was kind of scandalous, the scientists running the Viking program, who were determining where they were going to land, suddenly found themselves overruled by a group they didn't even know existed on the project.
Who were they overruled by?
They were never sure. It's just said NASA just said basically the boys downtown say you can't land there.
Do you have any theories?
They had already taken pictures of Cydonia with the Mariner 9. And
so Mariner 9 was pre-Viking.
Pre-Viking. That was the one where they discovered all the water channels and the Great Valles Marineris. But then the Viking pictures showed clearly this face, and then they also found this pyramid nearby. And so, and they were doing, that was part of the surveys to see if it was safe to land there. They were worried about hitting big rocks when the thing came down. So it was a reasonable error. But then they just said, oh, we can't land in Cydonia Mensa because it's too rocky. No, it wasn't too rocky. It was the fact that the face was there and the pyramid was there.
But who's calling these shots?
The Intel and Defense Department. NASA is I call it a hood ornament on the mysterious black sedan, which is the real space program in this country.
And that's just completely bound up with it.
It is. They make sure that they clear everything with the 3-letter agencies.
So you know about the secret space program.
Oh, yeah.
And you know about the von Braun and the Nazis and what's been carried over to the U.S. political system. Okay. Well,
much bigger.
But when I raised up Richard Hoagland's information and the stuff that he's bringing forward about von Braun, the Nazis, paperclip, and you're saying it's much beyond that. So where are we going?
Well, our original space program was all the product of the Nazi Party. Without von Braun and his crew and the paperclip program, I don't think we would have gotten to the moon when we did. We certainly wouldn't have beaten the Russians. Of course, the Russians grabbed their crowd. They also went into Germany and grabbed a bunch of scientists. But one of the biggest secrets of all is the secret space program, the fact that NASA is, it's like Blue Book used to be. I think it's a public relations front.
Right, yeah.
Blue Book never handled the real good stuff. And everybody knew that, except the common folk out there, who were diddled regularly and never told the truth about anything. But the big secret seems to have been for so long is why are we keeping classified the enormous facilities on the moon? And they're not ours.
Eventually, when they began to have confidence in me, I began to see things coming across my desk that were just absolutely incredible. And a lot of it is really hard to talk about because it's so far outside the normal concept of reality for the average American that they're going to find a hard time believing any of it. But I saw documents that were labeled under the classification top secret, and the compartmentalized, or the compartment that was put into was called MAGIC, M-A-J-I-C. Which told me that UFOs are real, which I already knew. I'd seen one.
Right.
But this went farther than that. It told me that they were extraterrestrial in origin, that there were 4 different extraterrestrial species or races visiting this Earth, and that they had actually entered into an agreement with the United States government with one of these species of alien beings to exchange technology, and it told me all the projects that was underneath this. Project Red Light was actually the testing of extraterrestrial craft. Project Plato was a diplomatic project Pounce was the recovery of technology. Pluto was the application of that technology to our own secret space program, not the public space program. There are two different space programs. One is what the public gets to see, which is overseen by NASA, and the other one is a secret space program that nobody gets to see, which is really overseen by the Navy Department under specialized, compartmentalized black projects. And what these people are doing in secret is just absolutely incredible.
Two Cape Canaverals. I mean, there was Cape Canaveral, which was the NASA Cape Canaveral, and there was the military Cape Canaveral, which was like a gleaming city. I mean, next to the NASA one in Florida. But you never had access to the military base. So, and at the same time, we're shooting guys up in bottle rockets. They're using electromagnetics and anti-gravity and antimatter and all the things that we either got from the Roswell crash in 1947 or got from the Germans from the 1930s and the 1940s.
So I was getting so much detail, so much specific information in the year 1993 before there was anything more than some very skeptical, non-conclusive documentaries on television, that I became convinced there was something very tangible to look at here. Specifically, he said that fiber optic cables came from UFOs, LED lights, Kevlar bulletproof vest material, Teflon, which is in so many things. Engines are all coated with Teflon on the inside. It's a non-stick material that works great for oil as well when you're in an engine. And then we get into computer chips, the whole integrated circuit revolution. Apparently prior to Roswell, we only had vacuum tubes, and then even the first solid-state transistors were one of the original products that came out of this divine endowment, whatever you want to call it. So this information also included how the ship got up to light speed. He said that the ship was a disk, and it would shoot out, it had an emitter that could go in any direction around the circumference, and it would shoot out a particle going 3/4 the speed of light, and then another particle would go out at the speed of light and bounce off of the first one, kick it, and then kick back and hit the edge of the ship. And if you do that trillions of times per second, or however many there are, it will actually accelerate the ship to near light speed. And this really was cool because I had already studied this little science geek thing called a radiometer, which is a glass ball that has these 4 little fins inside of it on a needle that spin around, and they're black on one side and white on the other. And when you read the thing, what you find out is that the black actually attracts electrons inside and photons. It actually, the bouncing of the electrons against the black causes it to spin. So I knew that it was possible to create movement through just particle interaction. Then we also heard that there were 3 main types of beings that had been found in these craft, and that's all I had back then. That there was a small type that was like the gray, so they were aware of grays all the way back in the 1970s, and of course you see them in Close Encounters, which was in the 1970s. Then they had a smaller gray, where he said that the head was a helmet, and you could remove the helmet, and that underneath was a monstrosity. So when you think about monstrosity, that pretty much makes you think reptilian. So all the way back then, I was wondering if there was some sort of really frightening looking humanoid. And then the odd question being too, why would they be dressing up to look like grays when they're really not? And that made me think about abductions and the possibility that there was some reason to why they would want, whoever's doing this would want everything to look like it's the same type of being. Then the thing that I found probably the most fascinating of all was that he said that the tallest of the beings in these ships that had crashed here, that are clearly not from Earth, looked just like us. They looked human. They might have subtle changes. They might have more of a diamond-shaped pupil instead of a round one. Their irises might be purple. They might have ridges on the roof of their mouth similar to a cat. The teeth might be different. They might have more teeth or less teeth. But for the most part, if you give them dentures and you give them makeup and maybe contact lenses, they could totally walk around here. You'd never know that they were any different.
The shape military people knew that there were 4 different groups that we were dealing with. There were 4 separate extraterrestrial intelligences involved. When I retired in 1976, the military knew, at least the U.S. military, and I am assuming the British as well, knew of at least 12 different groups that were coming and going and involved with us. I've been told by friends who are still working in high places, people who seem to know, people whose information I trust, that there may be well over 100 different groups coming and going from God knows where. The one that interested the generals the most in 1964 and 1967, the one that drove them up the wall, was the one group, 1 out of the 4, looked exactly like we do. And I don't mean similar, I mean exactly. So much so that they could sit next to you in an airplane or in a restaurant or in a theater, and you would never know. You would literally never know. And that bothered the admirals and the generals a lot, because we military have always been, we are trained to be paranoid. It's the nature of our game. The idea that there could be alien intelligence looking so much like us that they could walk up and down the corridors of SHAPE headquarters. They could walk up and down the corridors of the Pentagon. One day at lunch, a lieutenant colonel, a U.S. lieutenant colonel, says, "My God, man, do you realize they could even be in the White House?" It bothered him a lot that one of these groups looked so much like us, and I'd like to twist that around if I may. It's not that they look like us. We look like them. And there's a very good reason for it.
Now, I had that information in 1993. That's a long time ago. I had to really try to think, okay, why would there be people that look like us that are not from Earth? Does that mean, for example, that we did not start on Earth, that perhaps we were colonized from other places, and some of those places still exist, but maybe certain groups broke away, came here, and maybe they had a problem. Maybe like the flood of Atlantis, something like that, caused them to lose their civilization. They got trapped here. That's a possibility of how we could be. Later on, I explored the idea that the human form is actually a universal template, that it's everywhere in the universe, or at least everywhere in our galaxy. So, needless to say, getting a NASA physics professor through my friend telling me directly that UFOs are real, extraterrestrials are real, the whole thing's being covered up and they're laughing at us, and that all of our technology, all the modern technology that we love, computer chips, fiber optics, LEDs, that it's all a celestial endowment. That ignited a passion for me that led to reading over 300 books over the next 3 years. So I read about 100 books a year, or roughly 2 books a week. And that was all the stuff you'd find in the 000 section in the library, which is philosophy. So I read about Bigfoot, I read about Stonehenge, I read about the pyramids, I read about ghosts, I read about Spring-Heel Jack, this weird bouncing creature that they saw in Europe. So many things. And I just devoured everything on the paranormal, the Bermuda Triangle, all the stuff about Mesoamerican pyramids, all kinds of books, everything I could read about UFOs, documented UFO sightings, what were people seeing, mass sightings. I read about Fatima, where you have ultimately 90,000 people seeing this disc-shaped object zipping back and forth in the sky, giving off enough rainbow-colored light that the whole sky was lit up with rainbow light. And then somehow at the end of this experience, everybody's clothes were dry, although it had been raining the whole time, and they were soaked to the skin. So after that 3-year odyssey of really doing so much research, I was absolutely convinced that something was going on. And then along comes this book, The Day After Roswell, giving the testimony of Colonel Philip Corso. And Colonel Philip Corso, who's no longer with us, reported on exactly the same stuff that I'd heard from the NASA guy. He was saying that he was involved in a so-called foreign technology division where they were taking wreckage from this craft and putting it out to various corporations that deal with manufacturing. And they're just told, oh, this is foreign technology, as if it came from France or Russia or something like this. They didn't know where it came from, but one of the things that Corso reported was that they had these white-colored wafers about the size of a quarter, and they knew that it had to do something important, but they didn't really know why or what. And it was only when they looked at it under a microscope that they saw all these grooves and all these patterns, and that was a big, big computer chip. These craft also used fiber optic cables, and so they didn't know what that was, so they would take out the fiber optic cables and hand that to somebody else. And so what happened was that within a relatively short time, we were able to start developing much more advanced technology thanks to this.
And these were the artifacts on a crashed flying saucer. And we fed these things. He gave me the job of finding industry or scientists that were close to these items and feed us to them in normal R&D projects.
And you're saying these items came from somewhere else?
They came from a flying saucer.
How do you know that?
Because they were marked in the files as coming from New Mexico.
Roswell?
Yeah, Roswell. Well, I think some came, maybe another crash, but these came from New Mexico and Roswell especially. And General Trudeau gave me the job of working out a program, put these things out, feed them to industry, but there was provisions feeding it. They could have the patents, but they had to feed them out back to us as a competitive edge of the Army and to the American people and the world if necessary. Like the Japanese interviewed me, and I told them we put the integrated circuit out, and we also gave it to you. And I told the Japanese this right at the interview at Roswell.
Give me a little laundry list of the things that, the technologies that are at least partially responsible from the Roswell.
Well, there's the number one was the integrated circuit. Number two in importance was laser, because I had some laser instruments also. Then fiber optics came out of this. The imaging devices or night viewing devices came from this. Some of the work we did on electromagnetism and ICBMs and came from this.
Imagine the scientists and technicians and the companies that worked on this stuff are not real happy with your version of history.
No, I haven't heard anything. In fact, I've heard from scientists, at least a dozen of them since then, and they're supporting everything in the book. They say it's true. In fact, I just got a letter before I left from McDonald's nephew or son, and he told me that a lot of people come from IBM, from the Hughes, and from the White Pads and everywhere, and said that I filled some of the holes in which they've been wondering about for many years. And I just got this the day I left home, 2 days yesterday.
So is there any question, I mean, that elements of our military, our government, have known for a long time that UFOs are real, they're from somewhere?
Oh, sure they do.
Did you physically handle the artifacts from
Oh, yeah, I had them. They were in my possession.
What things did you have? What did you have?
I had integrated circuits, like size of a quarter. I had a bunch of wires. The colors were coming out of it. I don't say wires. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know if they were wires or any. They actually, well, I didn't know what they were. They just said we're emitting light. I had a piece of metal. Atoms were lined in it. So tough, paper thin, you couldn't break it, bend it, or anything. I had super tenacity fibers. That was, atoms were lined in it. You couldn't burn it, you couldn't cut it. And later on, the nearest thing in this world that we found to that was a spider web. There's a spider spins an atomic aligned web.
In fact, the idea of the cover-up, and you've said before that it wasn't really an active cover-up.
No, because I was telling in later interviews, if you let the government alone, it'll cover itself up. Really, the way we handled it, one was a climate of opinion, as I said. The other was within our own government we had enemies who would have been glad to destroy all this on us and to have us as coups. So what we did, I got the job of going and developing a program, which is discussed in the book how it was done. And through this program, we started feeding it out to industry. But this was not known, not on paper. They went out as normal research and development proposals, not to name something.
Yeah, you didn't put out a report that said, here's some alien stuff, figure it out.
We put our regular research and development proposal that came from somebody's brain. And also this was known among a select few, mostly combat officers, head-to-head. We kept this among ourselves, because otherwise we were certain that they would have destroyed our organization, and we had a good organization. General Trudeau pulled it together just a couple of years before. They would have destroyed our organization and labeled us as kooks and taken our budget away. So it had to be. We didn't cover because we gave it to industry with the provisions, and I'll repeat this. The provisions were to come back to us with what you prove, competitive edge of the Army, give it to the people and to the world if necessary, and take the patents. We encourage you to take the patents. And I have this in paper written by generals in 1963.
Another major event for me was going to my first UFO conference, which was in Connecticut. And at this conference, I was seated around a table where there were people talking about UFOs. And there was one guy who really needed to stop talking. It was driving me crazy. He had had a sighting, and he wanted to just dominate the whole conversation. But next to me was a man who was wearing a very traditional and kind of nerdy-looking brown suit, like this kind of a dark brown color. He was bald on the top. He had gray hair going down the sides. He had kind of the horn-rimmed glasses on that bounced on his nose. And this man told me right up front that he worked for Lockheed Martin, that he'd worked for Boeing, all these different defense contractors. And this, by the way, we're now talking 1996 is when this happened. I'm sitting with this guy at this UFO conference, and I had told him about what I'd heard from the college professor, and he was really impressed. He said, "Wow, your college professor, told you a lot, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's much, much more. And if you want to come and meet with me privately, I will tell you a lot more." So then he walks off, and he wanted me to go over by the salad bar or something. After he left, I had other people who were UFO enthusiasts at the table, and I told them what happened, and they said, absolutely do not go with this man. Because what they're doing is they're looking for psychics. And you already told them you're a musician, that you've played jazz, and so they've found that people who can play music well are much more apt to be able to do this psychic stuff. They will use you up as a psychic. You'll be barred for life from ever talking about what you learned. And then most people can only handle these jobs for 2 or 3 years, and then they die. And if you try to get out, they'll kill you. So I actually held off, and I didn't meet with the guy, which was really tough for me. And in the meantime, I go out on the internet. Eventually, by 1999, I've got my own website, and I start writing about this stuff, and it attracted a lot of interesting attention. So in 2001, I went to the Disclosure Project event. This was a big, big deal because you have Dr. Stephen Greer, who's put together a team of 39 people who have never come forward, most of them before.
We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years. The men and women who are on this stage and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone. In 1993, a group of military advisors to this project and I met out in the countryside in Virginia. And we decided that it was time for civilians, military, intelligence, and other people to come together to disclose the truth about the subject which is called UFOs. Since that time, I have personally briefed a sitting director of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, President Clinton's first CIA director. I have personally briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, many members of Congress, members of the European leadership, the Japanese cabinet, and others. And what I have found is that none of them are surprised that this is true, but they are uniformly horrified that they have not had access to these projects. We can establish through these witnesses whom we have identified, which now number over 400, and these are people who have been inside the CIA, NSA, NRO, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, all divisions of the intelligence and military community, as well as corporate witnesses, contractors to the government. And these are folks who have been involved in so-called black budget or covert unacknowledged projects. These unacknowledged special access projects are taking in at least $40 to $80 billion per year. And they are sitting on technologies that can change the world forever.
And they are saying that they witnessed UFOs, that they have them on. There was one guy who had radar tracings, visible sight from pilots, ground-based observation, and landing traces on the ground, where these craft actually leave footprints in the dirt. For me, I think the most amazing guy who I met at this event, Disclosure Project, was Sergeant Clifford Stone. I sought him out right away, went up to him, because he was claiming that he had actually gone up to craft that had crashed in this crash retrieval unit.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Clifford Stone. I was a Sergeant First Class, United States Army. I had a secret clearance with nuclear surety. I could get the clearance that I needed to do whatever it was that was necessary for me to do at the time on special operations when I was called in on those. What I'm referring to here is that I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. I'd like to go into detail on some of the cases about the nuts and bolts cases right here, but I will be available if you have any questions concerning my involvement in this. You can talk to Dr. Greer to arrange for me to get to talk to you. But the whole situation is, we've set back, we've told the American people that there's no such thing as UFOs. I've been involved where we have recovered these objects. We know them to be of extraterrestrials. In 1969, I had an event that happened to me while I was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. We went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. That would be my first exposure to any time that we would be recovering an unidentified flying object. When we went there, we already had people that was already in the facility. We were a backup team, which was supposed to be NBC because there was supposed to be some nuclear materials that was on board this craft. Later on, most people involved would have been were to be told that there was nothing on board it. It was nothing more than just a crash of one of our aircraft. I know better because I was one of the people that approached it with a Geiger counter to get surface readings. I was the first person to go ahead and see that there were bodies on it. That would be the first of approximately 12 events. UFO crashes are not events that take place every day. They're rare. I know we're not alone in the universe. I know that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's evidence that has been denied to the American people. I stand before you today in my almighty God, and I tell you this. If Congress calls me in and says, will you testify in detail what you know? I stand here today prepared and ready to do just that. Governments must never lie to the people for no reason. Thank you.
And he was the guy who had to interact with the beings when they first were still alive and were dying. And apparently what happens is that the being is giving you a telepathic connection to itself, where you feel everything that the being feels. You feel its pain. So if it has a severed leg, it's literally no different than the exact pain of your leg being severed, that you're dying, the fear of your death, all this kind of stuff. And as he's telling me this, you can see tears welling up in his eyes. And in fact, unfortunately, what people don't see online is the next one that happened on May 10th. That's the one I was at. Everybody sees the May 9th one. That's the one in the National Press Club. There was another one on May 10th in a private room, and that was the closed executive summary briefing for VIPs and members of Congress. I sat literally right behind Helen Thomas in her wheelchair. I was in the second row, right up front, because that's what I like to do, is be in the front. And so everybody did their spiel that they had done the day before, but a lot of them went into way more detail. And unfortunately, and I've talked to Greer about this, the footage is lost. There was somebody filming it. I remember seeing a guy there with a camera. We have no idea where it went. And it's such a shame because when Sergeant Clifford Stone went up there and he started talking about his intuitive interface with these beings, he literally lost it. He started crying. He had to walk off into the corner, and he got this massive standing ovation. Now, bear in mind, this is 2001, pre-9/11, and you have actual congressmen in the audience and their aides. So these congressmen were up on their feet, shouting, cheering, clapping for a long time to get him to compose himself and get back on the stage. It was an incredible moment, and I so wish that we had video of that, but we don't. After this momentum got started, approximately 2 billion people had heard about this in one form or another on Earth. Just a few months later, we have 9/11. And that really sort of changed the emphasis, and this opportunity that we had for disclosure got closed down. Ultimately, I believe that disclosure is a process that does not happen in one sudden thundering moment. It's an ongoing event. Now, the conventional view that you hear about disclosure is that this is going to be where the President of the United States gets on national television and tells us the truth. That's very likely to be one of the last, if not the last stage of the process. And there will be many intervals before that, which we are already seeing. Inside these classified government programs, they are doing something called PRI, or Processed Release of Information, which is a deliberate effort that has been ongoing since the Roswell crash in the 1940s to plant these seeds of truth into the mass consciousness.
And then I found out that there was indeed, Walter, a form of disclosure taking place. And it's known as subliminal education. And it's been underway for over 30 years, maybe longer, with movies, magazines, books, articles, people speaking publicly like me, big mouths like me, violating my national security oath.
What's happening is that alleged science fiction since the late 1940s has been embedding the truth in these storylines so that once we finally do get disclosure, we discover that we have been getting disclosure all along. So disclosure is an ongoing process, and it is very interesting to note how many movies are actually written in which the idea that UFOs are not real is treated like a joke. Everyone in the movie laughs at people who don't believe. And extraterrestrials being a fact of reality is presented in a wide number of movies. I remember watching the remake of Godzilla, and extraterrestrials had a lot to do with the remake of Godzilla. Most of the Transformers movies have had very shocking amounts of truthful information in them. And there was an X-Files series reboot in which the whole first premiere episode is absolutely loaded with all kinds of stunning information. The X-Files series reboot in its pilot episode that just aired in January 2016 had an incredible body of disclosure, everything from aerosol, chemtrail type spraying to Federal Reserve, financial collapse, extraterrestrial reality, abduction. It was just unbelievable, and we're seeing more and more of these kinds of things coming out now. So the effort for disclosure is a very interesting, almost schizophrenia in our society, in which if even one person who's had a sighting is actually witnessing some sort of extraterrestrially piloted craft, then you have to assume now that there is much more going on than just that one little peak. And that means that there could be a much greater amount of information to know than even what most of mainstream ufology has collected. You have to remember, the data that we have in the UFO field, such as about Area 51, this might be only one or two whistleblowers that come forward with stuff like this. People photograph it from a high mountaintop far away. We can't get in there. We can't see inside the facility. We don't really know what they're doing. But what's happening is that there are more and more insiders who have come forward, and they have independently spoken to me off the record. I've cataloged what they have to say, and I have memorized and in many cases notated vast bodies of information without putting it online. And the reason why is that when someone new comes along and they start saying all the same things or many of the same things, that's when I know that they are all speaking based on a common body of knowledge. And the scope and the complexity of these correlations between different data sets from different insiders is so vast that I don't believe it is possible for this to be a cover-up. The Occam's razor argument, slicing through to the simplest possible explanation, is that this stuff is actually happening, that our government is in direct contact with a variety of human-looking extraterrestrials, that they have already gotten joint bases both on Earth, inside the Earth, and on moons, and in some cases solid planets in our solar system.
We literally have a space program that makes NASA look like a bunch of idiots. Which is why NASA says we're probably not going back to the moon, we can't afford it. Bullshit. You know, we probably won't be able to go to Mars for another 20 years. Bullshit. We've been back to the moon. We have a small contingent on the moon, even today, and we've been to Mars, and we have a small contingent on Mars.
There is a very widespread amount of technology out there, including stuff that our own military-industrial complex has built. They have their own deep space ships, some of which are 2.5 kilometers long, cigar-shaped. This stuff, in fact, we have a whistleblower now, William Tompkins, who actually came forward as his aerospace engineer background gave him the blueprints that he designed these ships from. He's presenting us with those blueprints, showing us these cigar-shaped craft, which are identical to the ones that Corey Goode has referred to as having worked in when he was in the Solar Warden program. And William Tompkins independently gave the code name Solar Warden for the program. Then we also have Gary McKinnon, the UFO hacker, who independently finds the name Solar Warden when he's hacking the Pentagon through looking for UFO documentation. So this Solar Warden code name was also embedded within a list of non-terrestrial officers, people who are of military rank and designation but do not work on Earth.
And then on the desktop of the NAS machine, navigated to the folder, double-clicked on the first image. The application launches, the image comes up on the screen, but it's still very, very slow. And what I saw, I was hoping to see exactly what she was describing, you know, sources and very definite imagery. Mm-hmm. And what instead I saw was, I assume it was the Earth. This was in sort of shades of grey, but you had the Earth's hemisphere, doing about 2/3 of the screen. And then halfway between the top of the hemisphere and the bottom of the picture, there was a classic sort of cigar-shaped object. But with, you know, the sort of golf ball domes, geodesic domes, above, below, and this side, and I assume the other side as well, so it's the left and right as well. And with very slightly flattened cigar ends. No seams, no rivets, no sort of telemetry or antennae or anything like that. And it just had a feeling of not being man-made. There was none of the sort of signs of man.
So in essence, it was a craft, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And
when I first saw the top half of it, I thought, oh, well, it's, you know, a boring satellite picture or something. But as more of the thing was revealed, it was obvious it wasn't like any satellite I'd ever seen.
Wow.
And I've been space mad since I was about 14, so I've seen lots of pictures of satellites. And that's why it was such a strange moment. It was triumphant in a way. I thought, I've completely corroborated what Donna Hare has said, you know, on my own. But then got caught at the very same moment. There was an Excel spreadsheet, and the title was Non-Terrestrial Officers. Then it had names, ranks. Obviously, it's not little green men, so I was thinking, you know, what force is this? And that phrase is nowhere to be found on the web or in the official army documentation or anything. And the other thing was a list of ship-to-ship and fleet-to-fleet transfers. You know, bear in mind, fleet-to-fleet, so multiple ships, of materials. And these ships weren't, you know, US Navy ships. Again, I don't remember any of the names, but I remember at the time looking and trying to match up the names. And there wasn't anything that matched. I gleaned from that information, I surmised that an off-planet sort of space marines is being formed. And if you actually look at DARPA, Defense Advanced Research and Projects Agency literature at the moment in the last few years, and a lot of the government space command stuff. It's all about space dominance, you know, and it really is, you know, the final frontier. So I think, yeah, it's natural for them to want to control space and be developing a space going forward as a secret. But I think most likely using technology reverse engineered from ET.
Now, you start to put the pieces together, you start to see what everybody's saying, and this is the disclosure process. We are doing this right now. With you watching this show, you are part of that process. This process is not going to happen by the official level until it has been wrenched out of their hands. It is the last thing they ever want to do, is to completely tell us the truth, because court cases will then be filed. Charges will then be made. If you look at the LIBOR scandal, where the top mega banks have been accused of colluding with each other to rig their prime interest rate so that they can look good in their credit scores and misrepresent themselves to investors as if what they have is a very solvent company, when in fact they're all bankrupt and it's a big Ponzi scheme. You look at the fallout from LIBOR, which the mainstream media does not talk about. We are seeing multiple, multi-billion-dollar lawsuits that are being prosecuted and fined against these banks, and it has very seriously impacted their bottom line. They're not going to be able to do another bailout. They're not going to be able to do another TARP. The public does not want that to happen. So there is a situation going on right now in which we can actually see an example of a corporate mega entity that is essentially buying its time but is almost out of time right now. And when the time runs out, what we're going to find out is that not only have we been lied to about the scope of financial tyranny in our world, we have been lied to about extraterrestrials, because that technology that has already been taken in by our government includes free energy. It includes solutions to every problem that we have here on Earth. We can desalinate ocean water with very low energy yield. We can then pump that water into the deserts and literally irrigate all of the dead areas of our planet. We can completely clean up the Pacific garbage gyres, these gigantic areas of plastic that are just circling around and getting eaten by seagulls and whales and all types of marine life. We can eliminate any need for fossil fuel. We eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. There are technologies already in possession of these secret space program groups that eliminate any need for pharmaceuticals. You have pain relief technology in which you interrupt the potassium-sodium balance in the nerves. You don't need any analgesic drugs. You don't need to take any drugs at all. The only thing you would really still need to have the medical community for would be surgery. But all other types of medical illnesses can be treated by advanced technology that is already in possession of these people. That leads to longevity. That leads to life extension. If we want to become an intergalactic and interplanetary species, if we want to take the ships that are already built and use them to travel throughout the stars, we need to expand our lifespan. You're not going to be very successful if you only live for 60 or 70 years to go out on a deep space mission like that. They have the technology to dramatically enhance and extend our lifespan. They have the technology to allow us to travel through portals, to be able to go from point A to point B, even across vast numbers of light years, nearly instantaneously. We literally have all the tools in front of us right now for a Star Trek era. The only reason why we don't have it is that our planet, unfortunately, is being run by a sociopathic cabal of people who actually believe that humans are bad for the environment and they need to dramatically reduce population first before they release these technologies. Their goal was to bring us down to our knees so that we were so desperate for help that by the time they give it to us, they can instill total control and have absolute dominion over everyone. That's not going to be allowed to happen. There is an alliance here on Earth of very powerful entities. This actually includes a majority of the U.S. defense establishment, and I'm also talking about organizations that most people think of as negative, like the CIA. There are very strong, positive groups within all of these different intelligence agencies, the NSA, the DIA, naval intelligence, you name it. And their goal is to work with this international alliance of countries that are outside the Western system directly. and have seen that in fact we are being ruled by a Ponzi scheme in which they just print money out of thin air, do as much as they want. That's really the problem here. We can't allow these people to continue to make as much money as they want without having any collateral behind it. So once we get some further steps forward in the disclosure process, once the efforts of this alliance, this international alliance, get to the next level, there will be data dumps, there will be volumes of information released that will shake our beliefs to their core. They will challenge everyone. And what can happen right now is by you listening to this and educating yourself about the truth and about what is really going on in our world, you can help to calm people down when this disclosure comes out, because some of the material is so upsetting that there will be people who do not want to get out of bed, they do not want to eat. I call it the man in the bedroom. Imagine your loved one, you walk in there and there is someone else in bed with that person, and you had no idea that this was going on. We are taught to love these politicians. We are taught to aspire to be like them, think of them as great. People cheer in massive crowds at these political rallies. Now when we find out the scope of the betrayal, we find out that these people have not only been lying to us, but they've actually been deploying a weapons system into our food supply. They've deliberately added things to processed food that decreases lifespan, increases lethargy, fatigue, laziness, decreases your IQ, decreases your motivation. That's why it's very important to eat organic food, to try to eat as natural of a diet as possible, stay away from the processed stuff. This is a war. These people are trying to kill us. And if you can understand that, then recognize that once the truth comes out, it will be in the context, very likely, of these people having been arrested on a massive level. There's all kinds of logistics about how that's going to be done, when that's going to be done. It is a massive operation. The way I like to look at this is, if you throw up, you'll feel better. This is a situation in which it is akin to a coup, but it is a positive counter-coup against a group that has secured political control of our planet in an astonishing fashion and has been far more successful with it than most people realize.
If these accounts are true, then the story of humanity is far from what we've been told. Not just visitors from beyond our world, but a presence that may have shaped our past, influenced our technology, and quietly remained in the background of our civilization. Testimony after testimony from people who have had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Hidden behind classification, buried in deep black programs, and protected by a system designed to keep the truth fragmented and hidden. But the cracks are starting to form. More and more voices are coming forward. More pieces are starting to surface. And the question is no longer whether disclosure will happen, but how it will play out. The truth cannot and will not stay hidden forever. Disclosure is not just happening outside of us, but it is happening through us. Because ultimately, humanity's awakening is the true disclosure. And this is only the beginning.
At work like this, we consistently downplay the true extent of both our interest in and involvement with this phenomenon, and we routinely told British Parliament, the media and the public that UFOs were of no defence significance, when all the while, behind closed doors, we were looking at this very seriously. Make no mistake about it, technology acquisition lies at the heart of UFO secrecy, lies at the heart of government kind of policy on this, certainly in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure too in the United States, in Russia, in China, all around the world.